Hello, welcome to the live. Welcome to today's live. Welcome. Today we're going to talk about talk about all kinds of scientific stuff. What is your view on reincarnation? It's nonsense. Let's talk about no, chemtrails are not real. Explaining about Genesis. Okay, I'll go into that a little bit more, but welcome in. Come on in, guys. Keep tapping, keep tapping. We're going to talk about some evolution. Evolution? What's that? I ain't no monkey. I ain't no monkey. God did it. We're going to debunk that today. Every religion is about violence, basically. How does NASA figure math to avoid all the space junk when launching? You can't. There is no math that will guarantee you not see space junk. It's just that Earth is big and space is big. So if you go out into space, it's very unlikely that you're going to be hit by any debris. But that is, of course, becoming a more increasingly bigger problem. But today we're going to talk about evolution and how it really works. A lot of people don't understand evolution. And the best way to view evolution is like a tree. Think of a never-ending tree that's always branching. If you think of a tree, right, we know that trees like this, for example, you can see that it has a stump, right? And it has branches and keeps branching out over and over again, right? It keeps growing and growing outwards. This is how evolution works, where every species is a branch on the tree, and they all can be traced back to the same stump. So every single species shares a common ancestor about 4 billion years ago. 4 billion years ago, life started on the Earth, and since then, it's been branching out in this never-ending thread of evolution. That's how it really works. So when we take a look at this tree, we can think of it this way. See how amazing this tree is, how crazy, right? That is because this is where life started. This one little spot is where life started. And since then, it's been branching out. And these are all the species that exist today at the ends of the branches, right? Eukaryotes, plants, insects, sea life, fish, amphibians, reptiles, and then mammals. Now, about 4 million years ago, life started, and it split. A major split happened with the plants and fungi around 2.2 billion years ago, right? And that's when plants started to emerge and fungi. And then another major split occurred about 1.4 billion years ago. Insects, and eventually all kinds of sea life, more complex sea life. And another major split happened about from the fish. Another major branching happened about let's see, where is this? It's 1 billion years ago. 1 billion years ago. And then reptiles about 700 million years ago. And then birds, 400 million years ago, 300 million years ago, and then mammals about 300 million years ago. It's when mammals emerged. Right? So we have a vast tree of life, and this is how evolution really works. Now, when we talk about how the mechanism of evolution is a fact, right? The fact is that our genes change through time. That is something we could see. We can see this in the fossil record. We can see this in our DNA. The question is, how does it happen, right? How exactly do we evolve? Well, it has to do with speciation, right? So what does speciation mean? If we have a population of an animal, let's say there's an original population. This is called a barrier. A barrier forms, for example, they split. The population splits in two. So what happens is they go their own trajectories. They split into two trajectories, the same population of a given species. They split. They see different environments. They evolve differently. They don't reproduce with each other, which means that they are separate, right? So because of this, they evolve their own separate ways, and then they're isolated with one another, right? And eventually they become so different over time that they become a new species. They can no longer reproduce with each other. That's what science means. That's what speciation means. Speciation means the changes are so vast that that same population that once came from the same place can no longer reproduce with each other. That's what speciation, how that works. Now, on a genetic level, the reasons why things change is because every time your DNA mutates, every time you evolve, every time you reproduce, you're giving your offspring's DNA is going to be different from your DNA, right? Because mutations occur in your DNA, and when you pass them off to your offspring, they're going to inherit that new DNA. Now, sometimes those mutations can be beneficial. For example, what Darwin's finches. What you have is the environment required that for example, seeds, in that given area, there were seeds that the birds could get to. The longer beaks, the birds with the longer beaks, they survive more because they can find more seeds, right? So if you inherited a mutation that enabled you to have a longer beak, you would survive more over the animal that didn't have a longer beak, right? So the animal that didn't have the longer beak, they would die off. The one with the longer beak, they would survive. And the one with the longer beak would eventually reproduce and spread their genes further to their children. And the same process will continue to every single species. Every time a new species emerges, every time a new generation, the same thing would happen. Natural selection is what dictates how things evolve. The nature selects how a given species evolves. So again, this is a fact. Natural selection is the theory, it's the mechanism that explains why evolution happens. But evolution is a fact. It really happens. We can observe this, we can see this happening in the fossil record, in our DNA, and in lab experiments. But this is just the basics of it, right? This is one of the basics of evolution. There's many ways that you can evolve. There's many genetic ways, there's many natural ways you can evolve. But this is the main point. So when we take a look at, when people say, well, where's the first, right? This is a big question. Where's the first person? Where's the first animal? It doesn't exist. There is no such thing as a first person. Because me as a person, I will always give offspring as a human. My baby, if I have a baby, or me and my spouse, if we have a baby, our baby is always going to be human. They're not going to be a squirrel. They're not going to be a bird. They're not going to be a turtle, right? I'm always going to give offspring that are humans. They're going to be humans. But their DNA is going to be slightly different than mine, right? Your DNA is a little bit different than your parents' DNA. A little bit different, right? You might have different hair color. You might have different genes in some ways. that you inherited through the past, your ancestors. But the point is that your DNA is slightly different from your parents. So if we do this enough back, or if you go back enough with this idea, what happens is every ancestor you have is a bit different and increasingly different the more you back you go, right? So your grandparents are almost similar to you. They're almost identical to you. But your great-great-great-great-great-grandparents are very different from you genetically, right? And if you do this by the millions of years, they're going to be vastly different from you. So again, there is no one moment where you go from a human to a turtle. That never happens. But the point is that over enough generations, with enough changes, you're going to end up with a vastly different species looking back in time. And here's a great visual for this. So when you ask, well, where's the first human? Well, think of every generation like a photo. Imagine taking a photo of our ancestors. Actually, here's a better idea. Here's a better one. Imagine taking a photo of you every day from when you were an old person to a baby, right? From a baby to an old person. Imagine taking a picture of you from every step of the way. Well, was there any one day you became a toddler from a baby? No, right? Every day you were a baby, the next day you were still a baby. And the same thing applies to when you were a toddler. Was there a moment when you went from a toddler to a child? No. Every day that you were a toddler, the next day you were still a toddler. So there is no one moment that you went from a child to an adult or an adult to a grandpa. You didn't do that, right? It's a very slow process, but over time, there's a vast change in who you are. So now let's go back to this. This will make more sense now. If we take a look at our ancestors, every single photo in our timeline, right? If you go back, say this is a person of today. If you go back enough time, you'll find a person who was like a Homo erectus, for example, a different species. And then if you go back further, you'll find somebody who is a Homo habilis, even a vastly different species. So again, even though the photo, if I pluck a photo from here, right? If I pluck a photo from the photo right next to it, it's going to be the same species, right? If I pluck a photo from here, the one just before it is going to be the same species as this one. If I pluck a photo from this section, the one before it is still going to be a person, the same species, right? So that's why there is no first person. Can you point out where the first person is in this stack? No, it doesn't exist. There is no first person. There was no moment where you go from a monkey to a person. That never happened. It never happened. Because evolution is a very slow and incremental process that we don't see the changes unless individually we see it generationally, per generation. So that's how that works, okay? Anybody have questions so far? Theory of evolution. No, a theory is a theory in science is an explanation for the fact, right? So the theory of evolution via natural selection is the mechanism that explains why we see the biodiversity of life we see, right? Natural selection is the theory that explains why we see this tree of life. It still happens. It's still a real thing that happens. Natural selection really happens. It takes place. But it's a theory that explains the fact of evolution. In science, a theory is something that it explains the fact. It explains why it's this way, right? For example, why is there water in this bottle, right? Well, I can theorize because somebody put it in there, right? Somebody put water in the bottle. That's a theory that explains why there's water in the bottle. Somebody put water in the bottle. That's a fact. It still happened. But it's also the theory that explains why the bottle is this way, which is also a fact. right? The same with evolution. Evolution is a fact. What explains the fact is natural selection, which we can observe and see. And by the way, when you say it's just a theory, that doesn't damage science at all, right? Because in science, theories are the best. Theories is when you have a theory in science, that is very serious. It means you have tons of evidence and data that supports this idea. It means you have something that is profound, that actually explains how things work around us. That's profound. So that's any questions so far? It will always be a theory. Yeah, and it'll always still be true. Theories are not facts. Well, again, I just explained this to you. Theories are the mechanism of the fact, right? Theories explain why the fact happens. It explains the fact. Again, when you say it's not a fact, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It still happens. Theories explain the fact. There are mechanisms. Theories isn't a theory is not a statement, so it's not a fact or false. It's not fact or false. It's the mechanism, right? A theory is it's the explanatory thing. It's the explanatory mechanism that explains why evolution happens. So again, please understand this. When we say a theory in science is different than a typical theory, right? In science, a theory is an idea with lots of data and evidence behind it. It's not a statement. It's a mechanism, right? So it's not a fact because it's not, by definition, it can't be a fact, but it's also not false. It can't be false either. It's a mechanism, right? It's a theory that explains something. Now, the fact is that evolution happens because we observe genetic changes in our DNA. We can see the chromosome fusions. And here's, for example, one of the biggest proofs of evolution in our DNA. So we can actually sequence our DNA. We can see what happens. These are chromosomes. These are coils. These are molecules that contain DNA. And what happens is we can take a look at them and we can find out, we can trace back what happened to these chromosomes over time. So when we take a look at our DNA, what we find is these are called centromeres. These are parts of our chromosomes. And what we see is when we look back, we look back at what happened to cause that to be. When we take a look at other chromosomes of chimpanzees, for example, we see that they also share very similar chromosomes to us, but there's something we have that the chimpanzees don't have, and that's called a fusion. This fusion took place about 6 million years ago. It's called human chromosome 2, and it's what makes us human. It's how we split from the chimpanzees. This is direct DNA proof that we come from chimp ancestors. It's direct proof that we come from chimp ancestors because we can see the fusion between our chromosomes, and that's how we know we come from the chimpanzees, because we share the same chromosomes. They are missing one. They have one over us, and we're missing one, which is direct evidence that it fused together, and that's why we're human. This is profound evidence of DNA. This is profound proof of evolution. Profound proof of evolution right there in front of your eyes. And here again, here's a great picture of how we evolved, how our species evolved through time. Evolution is a fact. Again, evolution is a fact. The only theory is natural selection. Evolution is a complete fact. It really happened. It really happens all the time. We can see it. Okay? Now here is a fantastic image of how we evolved. Sorry guys, it's ridiculous. Here's a fantastic image of how we evolved. So here's a human. Right before us, Neanderthals, right? So remember, this is a different species. that over many generations, right? We didn't just morph into this over time. We didn't morph from a monkey to a human. It took many millions of generations, hundreds of thousands of generations to go from monkeys to human. Now, again, the monkeys of the past were not monkeys of today. These monkeys were not monkeys of today. These are the ancestors of the modern day monkeys. But what happened was, over time, one lineage went our way and became humans. And we can trace it all back to the first single-celled organism 4.3 billion years ago, the first living thing on the Earth. And it emerged from the Earth itself. The molecules of Earth yielded amino acids and lipids and phosphates and sugars, right? Sugars are just formaldehyde molecules stuck together. Proteins are amino acids stuck together. Smaller molecules becoming larger molecules. That's what makes life happen. Now, when it comes to human evolution, when we say we come from monkeys, what we mean is we share common ancestry with them. And what that means is, let me find a good picture for you. I love this one. So here's a great picture where you could see, come on. Okay. You can see about 9 million years ago, right, our branch split and one became orangutans but another line kept going, right? And that about 9 million years ago, another branch split off and became gorillas. Then one branch kept going, right? So these diverged into two. But then another branch split off and became humans. And the other branch split off and became chimpanzees. So if you trace all these modern animals back, you see about 9-10 million years ago, we all share a common ancestor. And that was Proconsul, one of the first apes. About 20 million years ago was one of the first apes that we share the common ancestor with. But again, we don't come from monkeys. We are cousins to them, right? We share common lineage if you go back far enough in the fossil record. That's why chimpanzees, bonobos, because they split off very near us, it's because that means they're more similar to us in DNA. Okay? Chimpanzees, bonobos, they are the most similar to us on the planet. They share 98% of our DNA. Humans are their own little branch. And again, there's many branches like we showed before, right? We're just one branch on the tree of life. And it's always branching out. Now, when it comes to... And there were many human species before us. We were not the only humans, right? Before us, there were many humans. Here's just a few of them. Here's a few of our human ancestors. Australopithecus afarensis, Australopithecus africanus, Paranthropus aethiopicus, right? We have all these different animals that were all human. From Homo habilis, this was a human. This guy was a human. He was considered a human, Homo habilis. Another human here, very similar to us. They can walk bipedally. They were very smart. They likely had some language. They likely could speak and utter some words. Ergaster is another very recent ancestor of humans. Erectus, another very recent one. This is about 2 million years old, maybe 2 million, 1.5 million years ago. Heidelbergensis, another one. Neanderthals, about 100,000 years ago. And then Homo sapiens, that's us. That's us. That's who we are. We're Homo sapiens. We're the most recent development in the tree of life, in the tree of apes. But so are the other chimpanzees, so are the other animals, but we are the most recent human. So that's incredible to understand. That's amazing to comprehend that there were many humans before us. In fact, we live with many of the humans before us. We live with them in the same place, Africa, in the Middle East, and in Eurasia, in Europe even. Many humans existed in Europe thousands of years ago. And here's a fantastic image as to how. Here's a fantastic image as to how this happened, right? Remember, we have all these fossils. We have all these fossils of these different humans. We can see the fossils, right? This is direct evidence that this happened. We can see the fossils and we can see the lineage, and we can see this in our DNA as well. Like I showed you before, human chromosome 2 is a fantastic piece of data that demonstrates our evolution. Horses. Horses also had a very amazing evolutionary path. You can see here, horses used to be very small, much more smaller than today. Horses used to be almost like dog-like animals right here. In the Eocene, about 50 million years ago. But what happened was the environment changed. Natural selection kicked in. It dictated certain animals would be more beneficial per their environments. Longer necks developed. They got taller. They developed more stronger feet, things like that. They were able to walk and run further, things like that. They could digest things differently. Their food was different about 5 million years ago. And then here we are today, the horses of today, we can see. And we can see all the different fossils. We can see the homology. We can analyze all the different fossils and structures of these horses and see that they have changed over time. All right. Any other questions so far? Yeah, the changes in hoofs are amazing. Yeah. We also have whale evolution, which is also amazing to me, which is a very profound process that took place with mammals. Whales are mammals, and what explains that is the fact that they used to be four-legged animals. Over here, Pakicetus is one of the first four-legged animals that shares direct lineage with modern-day whales. And we can see that over time, they went more in waters. They started to live more in the waters. Perhaps there was food there. Perhaps there's environmental reasons for this, or predators, right? So they would go into the waters. They live longer, and the ones that are able to survive in the waters longer, they survive more, and they spread their genes. Right, and this happened with all the rest, the succeeding generations after. They became more suited for the waters. They're able to grow. Their noses went up their snouts over time in their skulls. These are just mutations. That's what drives these changes, is genetic mutations. And we can see that modern day whales are mammals that can breathe. They can breathe they can breathe air. They don't breathe underwater like fish do. Fish breathe the oxygen in the water. But whales don't do that. They can't. They don't have gills. They're not fish. They're mammals just like we are. Yeah, we have the fossils that explain this. We have all the fossils. We have seen Pakicetus fossils in the same areas. We find them around Pakistan, I believe. Near the Middle East, we find them. But yeah, we can look at these fossils, and we can see that over time, that's what these animals did. We can look at the distinct layers in the geological strata, and we find that these Pakicetuses, they lived in certain areas, they lived near the waters, and we can find the other fossils that support this as well. Again, evolution, this is a fact. A very, very understood fact. Very well understood fact. It's not that they survive longer; they're better suited to provide and defend the young. Yeah, that's another reason why. There's many reasons. What I'm saying right now is a very simplified version of evolution. All right, I don't claim to be a biologist. I'm simply trying to explain it very simply. Here's some of the fossils. Here's the Pakicetus fossil that we've discovered. And here's an Ambulocetus fossil that we discovered, and we can see the similarities. You can see the skulls are very similar. The rib cages are very similar. Even the feet structure and the tails and the arms are very, very similar. And like I was talking about before, we also can verify evolution through the homologous structures. This is another profound piece of evidence for evolution. Profound way evolution happens. So we can see here, humans, cats, whales, and bats. Their arms are very, very similar. In fact, they're so similar that they have the same exact bones. And they're color-coded. They're color-coded to the specific bone they are. And you see, every single one of these arms in these mammals, all are equivalent. They're equivalent in terms of the structure of their arms. Now, of course, they have differences in lengths and sizes of the bones, but the structure is the same. Humerus bone connects to the radius bone, the ulna bones. The same with here, the same with the whale, the same with the bat. The carpals are connected to the hand bones and the finger bones. The same is true with the cats and the humans and the whales and the bats. And this is direct proof. This is direct proof that they all share common lineage. Because what explains the fact that they're all similar is the fact that they share common descent through natural selection. And again, this is how we discover and how we look at fossils. This is just one way that we look at fossils. One of the biggest ways, biggest evidences for evolution. How did every creature exist by coincidence since you're an atheist? Nothing necessarily exists by coincidence. This isn't a... There could be some natural reason for why all these things happen. Or maybe it is coincidence. Maybe things just are here by probability. We don't know. We don't know if there's some ultimate reason for this. All we know is that things change through time, and we can see this in the fossil record. In fact, it wouldn't make sense for there to be somebody putting us here, because look how flawed we are as beings. Look how flawed we are. Mutations are often harmful. They're also often useless. It's the very few mutations that allow us to be that allow us to be aided in our survival, that make us evolve. In fact, many mutations harm us and kill us. Diseases, cancers, right? These are some harmful mutations. The point is that when we look in the fossil record, we see a very predictable sequence of events that happen. And the idea that there's some cosmic being out there who's looking after us and wants us to change in this way is ridiculous. And the fact that we see a very predictable set of natural things happening. In fact, we can predict where fossils would be found in the geological strata. We predicted Tiktaalik through evolution. How do you make predictions if there's some god choosing which species would exist? You can't do that. You can't know, if there's a god, you can't know how its mind works. You wouldn't be able to predict it. But the fact that we can predict evolution is direct evidence that it's just natural. That there are just natural things happening around us, and we are a product of that. Okay? So, any other questions about evolution before I move on to another topic? Why are people still ignoring evidence? Because they don't want to believe that there's no God. They want to believe that there's a magic man that takes care of them. All right, so and now let's talk about Earth formation. How did the Earth get here? Right, that's another biggest question that you guys talk about. Where did the Earth get here? Well, here's how. This is called a protoplanetary disk. This is a big ball of gas and plasma, very heated. It's very dense. What happens is, over time, when you have this disk rotate due to angular momentum, it cools down. It cools down, and what happens is material on the outside condenses into larger material. You have smaller rocks. You have colder gas become precipitate into rocky things, icy things, and this is what causes rocks to form around the sun. And from there, what you have is this happening, a very, very dramatic process in which the Earth was initially very warm, a very big ball, a very warm ball of molten rock. The reason why is because around that disk, we're being bombarded by other small rocks, right? Imagine all these little rocks bombarding each other, crashing into each other. All these little rocks. Here's a good picture of it, right? Imagine all these little rocks smashing into us, even larger rocks, right? Large rocks, big rocks, small rocks colliding with us. And this generates a lot of heat. It makes a lot of friction heat. It makes our planet warmer. Now, of course, we survived. Our planet survived because it was larger. The larger one survived, kind of like evolution, but for physical rocks. In terms of the largest rocks survive, the smaller ones get flung into these larger rocks due to gravity, and that's what Earth becomes. And you can see here, Earth was a molten rock because of this. After the bombardment period slowed down, after the rocks settled, after the asteroid belt became more pronounced, after all the planets became more pronounced in their orbits, the Earth remained a rock of molten. And because it was so hot, all the heavier material sunk due to densities, right? Because the metals of the Earth and the rocks of the Earth were much more molten, they were more liquidy. The heavier elements fell down to the core. And that's why our core is mostly iron, right? These heavy elements, because they sunk down to the core as liquid, as the Earth, especially the inner Earth, was very, very hot, very hot. And that's what started our core. The core was the sinking of all that material down into the ground, down into the center of the Earth, building a core. And from there, the lighter material went up, right? It was able to float upwards because it's less dense. And because of this, we have a very pronounced crust form or we call it a surface. And the surface consists of silicon and all kinds of nickel and lighter elements. Nickel's in the mantle, but lighter elements like silicons and all things, sands, right, things like that. And that's basically what makes up the crust. And from there, as the Earth cooled down, the Earth was able to cool down because it was not being bombarded anymore. And what you have is volcanoes occur. You have plate tectonics begin to emerge. The crust began to settle, and it began to develop plates on it. And these plates were able to move around the surface because of the molten underneath it, pushing upwards. Right. This is the basics of plate tectonics. And then you have water. Where did water come from? Where did the water come from on the Earth? Well, remember when they said all those meteorites hit the Earth? Well, this is what gave us water. These are chondrites. These are carbonaceous chondrites. These are asteroids that contain ice in them, right? A lot of ice in them. Water ice. And when these asteroids, and this is water from the protoplanetary disk, the one we were talking about before, right? The disk contained all that ice, water, and it made its way into rocks. It precipitated into rocks. It condensed into rocks, and when the rocks hit the Earth, well, guess what? On the Earth, it was water. It melted. When it hit the Earth, it melted because it was hot, right? All that water melted on the Earth. It became gaseous at first because it was too hot to be liquid. But once the Earth cooled down, well, guess what? Now you have that water vapor in the atmosphere rain down. All that rain was able to become an ocean. Oceans around the Earth, lakes, right? Rivers and lakes upon the crust and surface of the Earth. And then you have climate. You have the first climate. You have clouds form, right? Clouds and rain and precipitation, evaporation. You have the first atmosphere form. The oceans were still hot at this time, but the earth continued to cool down. The plates began to separate even more. You have less and less clouds, less and less heat. The water was able to make it into crust, things like that. Then you have a sequence of more climatic changes going through the Earth's history. But that's the point. The point is that's how the Earth got that way. It's just a big rock. And that's really how that happened. And that's how many other planets happened. It's just big balls of stuff, material, that are orbiting around the Earth. Now the moon. How did the moon get there? Well, the moon is another rock, like we said before. And what we think is that in the early Earth history, about 4.5 billion years ago, a large Mars-sized planet crashed into the Earth, right? Remember, this is when the Earth was really molten. It crashed into the Earth, and from that impact, it ejected debris, a lot of debris. But remember, the Earth was still very liquidy at this time. Remember, the Earth was like a molten ball at this point, right? It was so hot. But when this larger planet smashed into the Earth, it ejected that material outwards, and that material became the moon. That material became the moon. Clumped together eventually, it became the moon. And the reason why we think this, we know this happened, is because the moon is very similar in composition to the Earth. Very similar composition. We also know this because the moon has almost no core. This is exactly what we'd expect if it was just broken off material. So we can understand that the moon itself comes from the Earth, comes from this collision between this little planet and the Earth, because of the evidence of the fact that it's very similar to us, and the fact that we can examine the moon. On the Apollo mission, the astronauts brought back rocks from the moon. We actually brought tons of rock samples back from the moon landings. And when we examined them on Earth, we found out that we dated the rocks on the moon, and they were actually very similar to the date of the Earth. Very similar. In fact, the composition of these rocks are very similar to Earth rocks. So this is amazing. This is incredible that the moon is really part of our planet, part of the Earth. That's incredible to understand. That's amazing. For millions of years, people have wondered about what the moon was, and now we finally know what it is. People have wondered about the Earth and the moon and the stars, and now we know what they are. That's for the first time in human history. We are finally able to understand these things. That's incredible. That's amazing. Why doesn't the moon have an atmosphere? Yeah, the moon doesn't have an atmosphere because it's too small. So it's possible that the moon had an atmosphere in the past, very distant past, but because the moon is so small, it has very little gravity, right? The reason why the Earth has so much atmosphere is because we have gravity pulling in that air, pulling in those molecules of air. That's what keeps us afloat. That's what keeps our atmosphere here. But every now and then you have the sun beaming down energy, and it hits the top layer of the atmosphere, and it knocks some of those molecules out into space. But we also have biological processes that generate molecules of air as well. So we have a cycle on Earth that allows us to have a stable climate, stable air, and atmosphere. But on the moon, even if the moon was able to have an atmosphere in the past, the problem is there's no process in which you can make more atmosphere from the moon itself. There's no tectonic activity. There's no volcanoes. There's no way you can get gas from the inner moon into its atmosphere. There's no such process. It's also the fact that even if the moon had it in the past, well, guess what? Because there's less gravity, there's less energy, there's less force keeping those molecules towards the surface of the moon. That that sun energy is going to hit those molecules and make it more easy for them to escape into space. So the fact that those molecules are so easily knocked out means that the moon is not possible to have an atmosphere for very long. This applies to Mars too. Mars has a very, very teeny tiny atmosphere, right? Very teeny tiny atmosphere. And the reason why is for the reasons I just said before. Mars is about 30% smaller than the Earth in terms of mass. It's about a third of our mass. So this means that any atmosphere on Mars is going to be more easily knocked into space, right? Because of the sun's energy, cosmic energy as well. Also, Mars has no magnetic field. A magnetic field is also what protects you, right? The magnetic field of the Earth protects us from space rays, right? Cosmic rays that come from stars or other galaxies, perhaps, can damage and hit the Earth. But our magnetic field deionizes that radiation so that if it hits the Earth, it's not going to harm us. Quite incredible that the Earth's magnetic field can do that for us. But on Mars, there is no such thing. If it did have a magnetic field, it's long gone because there's no convection in the core to make it stable. So we know that Mars has a very thin atmosphere. There's no activity happening today where it could produce more. So we know that the atmosphere, the very little atmosphere of Mars is holding on, right? And eventually it's going to be gone forever. But we do think that in the past, Mars had an atmosphere. And we think it also had liquid water on its surface. We think that Mars had tons of water. In fact, almost as much water as the Earth on its surface. And because of this, we think that there could be life on Mars. There could be life or hidden life in the past that existed there. But again, since Mars is smaller, just like the air molecules, the water molecules on the surface will be susceptible to being subliminated, right? What that means is essentially gassed out into space because the solar radiation and cosmic radiation. The magnetic field slowed down over time, less convection, less heat on the core. It got cooler, and the atmosphere was stripped away. So we're lucky. We're lucky to be on Earth because we have protection. We're being protected by the Earth's magnetic field. Other planets are not so lucky, unfortunately. Other planets are... It's like a cousin that went bad, right? It's like a cousin that went the wrong way. Planets are like our cousins. How did the Earth become a perfect sphere? Well, the funny thing is, Earth is not a perfect sphere. It's actually slightly lumpy in some parts of it. But the Earth, the reason why things that are large are spheres is because there's enough gravity, right? On the Earth, you have lots of gravity pulling inwards in all directions, right? In every direction of the Earth, gravity is pulling downwards to it. And because of this, it's being compressed in all directions into being a sphere. But again, there's slight anomalies in that, and that's what we can see. That's exactly what we see. Because of the different materials on the Earth's surface, right? Because of the different ways that it formed. Other planets, for example, here's the smaller planets and smaller asteroids are even more lumpy. The reason why they're lumpy, like this, is because there's not enough gravity to make them spherical, right? Very, very little gravity. They're not going to be very spherical at all. Another reason why is because a lot of these asteroids are actually made of mostly ice, water ice. And we know that water ice tends to not be very crystalline. Okay, any other questions? How did the universe come into play? What do you mean? The universe could have. The universe is unknown. We don't know what the universe is. We don't know how big it is. We have no idea how big the universe is. But here's a. This is why we call it the known universe. But here's a very good. Here's a very good illustration of how the universe looks like to us. So here we are on the Earth. This is over Russia. Lots of little lakes, glaciers, mountains. But let's leave the Earth's surface for a little bit. There it is. There's the Earth, our planet. Look how beautiful it is with oceans and greens and plants, clouds. Beautiful little marble we are. There's Australia. Oh, look, there's all the satellites that orbit around our planet. That's how you communicate. GPS and all kinds of satellite communications come from those satellites. Other debris, the moon. Oh, now we're leaving. We're leaving. The moon's orbit. There's the sun. Okay, there's the sun. Here's the planets. This is Venus. This is Venus's orbit. That's Mercury. Here's Mars now. Mars is even further away from the Earth. Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune. Pluto's somewhere out here, very, very far away from the other planets. Wow, now the sun's just another one of those stars. Very, very small star now. Now it's just one other star, one random other star in the middle of our galaxy. Okay, now let's move out the galaxy. This is how far our radio signals have traveled since we've first emitted them. That's as farthest as we can communicate. Oh, there's our Milky Way galaxy now. Right? Wow. Now we're out of the galaxy. Now there's all these other galaxies here around us. Thousands of them. Thousands of these. Each one of these dots is an entire galaxy full of millions and millions of stars. And these are all the stars that we know. These are all the galaxies that we can see. We can't see in many of these places. We can't see these places. We can only see a very limited section of the universe. We can only see a very limited section with telescopes because it takes light time to travel through the universe. And this is how far we can see with the Big Bang. This is the Big Bang right here. This is, when we say the Big Bang, this is what we mean. This is the Big Bang. This is how far our telescopes can see. This is 13.8 billion years ago, right? This is the end of our understanding of the universe. This is all we can see. All we can see is this microwave radiation that radiates all of space and time that we see. But that's as far back as we know. Now let's zoom back into it. All these galaxies. There's some galaxy clusters. There's all kinds of ways that galaxies come together in our universe. But let's find our galaxy here. If you notice, there's spirals. We're on the outer end of the spiral here. The outer ends of a spiral. We're not even at the center of the galaxy. We're at the end of it. Some boondocks of the Milky Way. These are all stars. Many of these stars have planets around them. In fact, almost every star we see has around 3 to 4 planets orbiting around it. Who knows what there could be all kinds of living things around these stars too. And again, our little star in the middle of nowhere, a little star on a little planet. The sun is just another star, just like all the other stars. In fact, the sun is nothing but an average star. And here's our planet zooming in, the moon's orbit, a little moon we got. And then the Earth. So, yeah, that's how far back we can see. We don't know what else is out there. We have no idea what else is out there. It's a mystery. So when we say, well, what caused us? These are questions that nobody understands. We don't know. They're great questions, but they're unknown. We don't have the answers to them. We just don't know. The sun isn't a star. Yeah, it is. Yeah, the sun is a star. In fact, here, let's go through the different types of stars. I love this. That's actually a good idea. I'll show you the sizes of the stars. So we have, trying to find a good graphic for you guys. Here it is. Here's a better one. Okay. So we have these stars. Hold on. There we go. Okay. So here's all the different types of stars. They're classified by these letters: O, B, A, F, G, K, M. M is typically the smallest star, right? M stars are redder. And in space, when it comes to stars, when we look at them through telescopes, the bluer they are, the hotter they are. In fact, when you're bluer, you're hotter. When you're redder, you're actually colder. The red stars in our galaxy are actually very cold. Here's the K stars. Ks are orangey. They're kind of like orange, right? So you get progressively towards blue. Red, orange. Here's your G stars. G stars are typically yellow, whitish. And that's what our sun is. Our sun is a G-class star. You can see here it's just typical star. It's not very big. It's also not very small. It's just average. Most stars in the galaxy, though, are M stars. About 70% of them are M stars. They're very small. About 10% are K stars. Another 10% are G stars. And the rest are F, A, B, and O stars. O stars are very, very rare because they're typically going through something called a supernova. Typically, they're called blue giants. They're very big. And you can see they're much more massive than our sun, even 10 times larger than our sun. These are big, big stars because they're going through, typically going through a process where they're about to explode in a supernova. They're very, very exhaustive stars. They're very inefficient stars, right? The M stars, because they're so cold, they actually use less fuel, right? They're like the Priuses of the galaxy. They use way less energy, so hence they're going to live longer. Some of these M stars can live for trillions of years. They can survive for trillions of years. The K stars are kind of like a small compact car, where you have them emitting fuel. They can last about maybe 15, 20 billion years, maybe 30 billion years. The G stars, like our sun, they're a little bit bigger. They last about 10 billion years. Our sun is about 5 billion years old. So it only has another 5 billion years left until it becomes a white dwarf. Our sun is going to die in about 5 billion years. And in 5 billion years from now, our sun will not longer be here. It will exhaust all of its fuel. Okay, and then we have F stars, A stars, B. Some of these stars only last about a few million years, at best. So let's take a look at biggest stars in universe. Objects. Okay. I love these stuff. I love these videos. So, oh yeah, here's Pluto. Very small planet. That's not even a planet anymore. We consider it now a dwarf planet. Here's Europa. These are moons of Jupiter. Here's our moon. Our moon is fairly big. Mercury, it's almost the size of the moon. This is a planet called Mercury. Titan, this is a moon of Saturn, and it's bigger than Mercury. Mars, it's getting there. Venus, it's almost like the size of Earth. There's the Earth. That's how big it is. This is an exoplanet. Exoplanets are planets that are outside of our solar system. These are things we can only see with telescopes. They're not in our solar system. Neptune, fairly big. It's mostly made of gas. Uranus and Saturn, gas and hydrogen and helium. Jupiter, and here's our sun. Look how big the sun is compared to those planets. And now we have Sirius A. This is Sirius. You can see this when you look out in the night sky. You can see the Sirius star. Okay, now we get into red giants. These are big boys. Arcturus. That's even more giant. And here's a black hole. This is the black hole in the center of our galaxy right here. It's the size of it's that size. It's a supermassive black hole. And black holes are the size of stars, but have the mass of millions of stars. They're super dense objects. And now we have some of the most massive stars, the super giant stars. These are really big. Really big. Look how much bigger they are compared to our sun. That's our sun right there. The tiny little dot, that's our sun. And look how big these things are. These are gigantic. And this is called a hypergiant star. Man, they keep getting bigger. Holy moly. Canis Majoris. These are giant stars. 2 billion kilometers across. 3 billion kilometers across. That's some of the biggest stars that we know of in the universe. They're giant, and these are likely about to go supernova. That's why they're called hypergiants. They're likely about to explode. By the way, every second in the universe, 1,000 stars explode and go supernova. Every second. That's how many stars there are. Every second, 1,000 stars are exploding, going supernova. Now we have a black hole. This black hole is super, super massive. Some of the biggest black holes that we know of. What else are they going to show us? I haven't even seen this video. Ooh, nebula. Okay. So this is called the Helix Nebula. This is a star in the center. So if you can see, there's this little star in the center here. And the reason why it's a nebula is because all that gas and dust is stripped away slowly from the star going outwards, right? The plasma and the gas that made up the star is now out in space. There's many reasons for this, typically because of gravity. The star's dying. It doesn't have fuel, so it succumbs to gravity and starts to strip away its atmosphere. What else are they going to show us here? Ooh, Head Horse Nebula. This is about 7 light years away. And that's typically where stars are born. This is a collection of nebulas, collection of gas clouds. And some of these peaks is where stars are being born. If you can see here, this is a collection of many stars. Some of these stars are baby stars, just a few million years old. Some are just being born. And this is where stars are born. These nebula clouds are where stars are born. Reason why is because when you have gas clouds collapse, they become hotter, and stars begin to ignite in the center of the clouds, and because of fusion, they fuse together elements like hydrogen and helium that can fuse together and emit light outwards, and this causes this star to ignite. What else are they going to show us here? Segue to a dwarf galaxy. Ooh, okay. So here's a galaxy, a very small galaxy. Only about 200 light years across. Did you know that just like moons of Earth and Jupiter and Saturn, You can have moon galaxies, satellite galaxies orbiting around larger galaxies. In fact, we have a moon galaxy. Here's another. Here's another one. Sleeping Beauty galaxy. Galaxies are some of the most beautiful things in the world. 50,000 light years across, and here's our Milky Way. Milky Way is a fairly large galaxy, 100,000 light years across. So going from one edge of the galaxy to the other edge would be 100,000 light years. That means even going at the speed of light, even if you were to go the speed of light, right, the fastest speed in the universe, it would take you 100,000 years to get to the other side. 100,000 years going at the speed of light. That's how large our galaxy is. That's how big it is. And in our galaxy, there are hundreds of billions of stars. And we're just one of them right here on the edge, at the outer edge. And the reason why in the middle there's a lot of, it's a much more brighter, is because in the middle, that's where the black holes are. There's a supermassive black hole in the center of our galaxy. We're orbiting a giant black hole in the center of our galaxy. That's insane. But what happens is a lot of those stars around the black hole are orbiting around the black hole. And they're going super fast around it, right? Imagine like Mercury, right? Going very fast around the sun. The same applies to the black hole. Some of the stars around the black hole are going millions of miles an hour through space, orbiting around the black hole. And when it comes to the galaxy, and that's why it's very bright, because there's a very dense amount, very dense stars there, right? Very dense area of stars. Here's Andromeda. Andromeda galaxies is about twice the size of Milky Way. The Milky Way. It's a much bigger galaxy. And here's some of the biggest galaxies we know of, hypergalaxies that can contain hundreds of trillions of stars. Here's your supercluster, clusters of galaxies. Here's Leinecke. Here's a supercluster of galaxies. And you can see here there's like strings of galaxies and all kinds of networks of galaxies that exist in the universe. Remember, there are trillions of galaxies in the universe, as far as we can see. What is this, the CMB radiation? Yep, there it is, the observable universe. So, that is mind-boggling. It's mind-boggling what's out there. Nice cartoon. No, we everything I just showed you, we can see with telescopes. Everything I just showed you, we can see with telescopes. There's no CGI here. I mean, yeah, sure, the video is CGI, but we can take a look with telescopes and see these things. We can take a look at the black holes. We can take a look. We have pictures of black holes. We can look at these stars with your own eyes, with your own telescopes. You can see other moons, other planets, other stars. All you need is a galaxy. All you need is a telescope. What kind of other humans were there? Sure. So we talked about this before, but there were many humans before us. They look like this. Right? They look very similar to us, but they had different noses, they had different mouth structures, a little bit different, but they were still human from here to here. The further back you go, we're more ape-like, right? Well, we still are apes, but we were, more primitive type of ape. Here's a nice picture too, showing them the different types of yeah, so we have Paranthropus, Homo habilis, Homo erectus, Georgicus. And remember, these are very similar to us. Right? You can see these guys look very similar to us. But they're still not Homo sapiens. They're still not us. They're still not us. They're a different species. That's our species, Homo sapiens. Sapiens. And at the time, here's is a really freaky picture, but this is what they look like. This is what we think they look like based on their fossils, based on their fossil structures. These are all of our ancestors. And it's amazing how each of these people had their own stories, their own beliefs, their own stories, their own family, right? Think of all the billions of people that came before us, each with their own ideas, their own world, their own perspective. And we migrated from Africa, right? Our species comes from Africa, just like most other apes. Some come from Asia, but our species came from Africa. And from there, we migrated out of Africa into the Middle East, Asia, Europe, and eventually North America. Let me see if I can find them. Found all the bones. Yeah, we have found all those bones for people. We have all those people we found. We have all their bones. We have all their fossils. Thankfully we have them, but we don't need them. We also can look at our DNA and find them there. We can look at our DNA and see the evolution take place in our DNA. Here's a great picture of how we migrated from Africa to North America and Europe. So here's the earliest humans were here, right? Near Kenya, Central Africa. But around 100,000 years ago, there was many climatic changes that forced us to move and migrate. We went to South Africa. We migrated across the continent to West Africa. Then we had the first wave of people go out into the Middle East. Because remember, there was a land bridge. There was a land bridge here and here, because you can see at the top here the glaciers are changing, right? The ice caps are changing because of the climate, right? Over time, the climate changes naturally, and what happens is it forces many species to become different, right? Because they have to survive different climates. So we crossed Middle East into Asia. This is about 50,000 years ago. We moved into the Australia area, into Eastern Asia, and then into Europe about 35,000 years ago. The first Europeans, Neanderthals as well. In fact, Neanderthals lived with us in Europe 30,000 years ago. And then about 20,000 years ago, the first humans migrated from Russia, well, today's Russia, to Alaska through the Bering Land Bridge. The reason why there is a bridge, today it doesn't exist, but back then there was enough ice that the sea level was way less, right? The sea levels today are higher than they were 10,000 years ago because of ice ages. So during the ice age, there was a land bridge, and this allowed us to walk across the continents into North America. 8,000 years ago, 15,000 years ago is when the first humans lived in America. The Native Americans. And South America as well. And this is where the Mayans began, right? The Mayans, the first civilizations, the first agriculture systems, right? The first roads, the first religions, the first societies. This enabled us to become who we are today, right? After we invented paper, we invented different languages, we invented the wheel, right? These small changes helped us to be the way we are today. That's what makes us human. So what makes us human is the fact that we stuck together and we lived together closely and we work together to build things. We use tools, we used our minds and brains that we had, and that's what makes us human. There's a fusion of chromosome 2, but the DNA isn't chimp. Yeah, the fusion, that fusion is what makes us human, right? That chromosome 2 that's what makes us human. That difference between us and the chimps. That's the direct proof. You can't get better than that. Do you think we'll be able to make Mars a habitable planet? If so, why or why not? Yeah, so going into the future, Mars is the most likely candidate for a second home. And unfortunately, well, Mars has a 24-hour day. Think about it. Mars has a 24-hour day. It has ice caps. It has water. Well, in the form of ice. It's frozen, but you can melt it. So the astronauts that go to Mars will be able to actually melt ice and use it to grow things. The only problem is, because like I said before, Mars has very little atmosphere, we'd have to live in little domes that protect us from the radiation. We'd also have to wear suits because there's no air on Mars. You can't breathe the air. There's no oxygen in there. So you'd have to wear suits and live in domes. But the good news is that a lot of Mars is very similar to the Earth. A lot of Mars is similar. The regolith, the Martian soil, is almost the same, almost identical to Earth soil, except for the organic material, obviously, and the water. But the minerals, the elements in the Martian regolith is exactly the same as Earth. In fact, you can grow stuff on the Martian soil. In fact, we've done experiments with it. We know the type of soil that exists on Mars. We can determine with science and experiments that you can grow plants on the surface without anything else. You can grow plants. So this is how they're going to survive, right? They're going to build huts or little domes. Well, they'll be protected, and they'll live in these habitats. And eventually they'll go underground, and eventually they will form a small city on Mars. They'll have greenhouses where they'll grow crops and plants, things like that. They could even use solar energy. They can have solar panels because Mars isn't too far from the sun. It's not that far. You can still have energy. Yeah, it's very possible. Now, in terms of making Mars like Earth, it's also possible. And I have a video about that on my main channel. That process would be difficult. It would take many generations to happen. But the idea is you make Mars warmer, right? Mars is cold. So if you can make it warmer, it'll allow more oxygen, more air. It'll be, if you unfreeze the ice, if you melt the ice, you can have more liquid. You could potentially have liquid on the surface if there's enough pressure in the atmosphere. So it's a challenging thing, but it's possible to make Mars like Earth. Very possible. It won't be perfect, but it'll be better. Where is the ice located? Sure. So Mars has lots of ice, almost everywhere. But the most prominent places are the ice caps. Mars has ice caps. Very big ones. The ice caps are mostly made of CO2 and water. CO2 is cold enough. So on the Earth, CO2 is... The conditions on the Earth don't allow CO2 to be in solid form for very long, right? Because if you ever had dry ice, that's CO2 but frozen. But what happens is it sublimes, right? It becomes gas very quickly. But on Mars, it's so cold and there's so little pressure that it's able to survive as ice and stay that way. Same with water. So you have a mixture of CO2 and water ice on the caps. You also have ice under the surface of Mars. Under the surface is subterranean ice. A lot of it too. In fact, we can dig it up. In fact, we can actually dig into the soil and find ice. And we think that's how we're going to get water. What they'll do is they'll dig little holes, they'll melt the ice inside of it, and what will happen is that they'll have water seep up to the surface that they can potentially drink. Or they got to filter it, but they can potentially drink that water if it's filtered properly. So again, you have water, you have food sources, and you have energy. You can live there. You can live on Mars if you really wanted to. If we melt the ice caps, the CO2 will be released into the atmosphere. Yeah, exactly. That's the point, right? If we melt the ice, that ice will go into the atmosphere and it will cause more warming, right? Because CO2 and even water vapor, these are greenhouse gases. They trap heat into the lower atmosphere and they make it warmer. So if we can melt all the ice, it'll be more warmer. And that's the idea. But there isn't enough ice on the planet to make it that much warmer. We would have to do more. Unfortunately, we'd have to bring more air into we'd have to bring more air to it. We'd have to do more. Are some humans more evolved than others? No, there is no such thing as being more evolved than another thing. There is no such thing as more evolved or less evolved. Everything is equally evolved. The problem is, the only thing is that we're different. We're all different in the way we are genetically. But evolution is no trajectory. There's no trajectory to evolution. We're not the pinnacle of evolution. We're not the end of it. We're evolving still. We're always evolving. Evolution's always happening. And there is no stop to it. It never ends. Unless we go extinct and we all die. But as long as there's life, there's evolution. As long as we're alive, there will be evolution. Which is amazing. Any other questions? Stars die. Galaxies perish too. Yeah. So yeah, we can talk about star death. How do stars die? So, depending on the star, every star has a different ending. But here's a nice little graphic that shows you typically what happens. So, the smallest stars we know of are brown dwarfs. These are very, very cold stars. They typically stay that way forever. They will always be brown dwarfs. So when you're very small, it turns out in space that's good for you because that means you'll live almost forever. You'll never die. If you're a brown dwarf, you'll always be that way, but you'll always be cold. A red dwarf, the same thing happens, essentially. It lives a very long time as a red dwarf, but eventually what happens is it becomes a white dwarf. That energy from the outside, once the red dwarf dies, gravity takes over more, and star plasma and stuff and gas from the sun, from the star, gets emitted out into space. And what remains is the center, the core of the star as a white dwarf. Okay? So that's how that works. Our sun, when our sun dies, what will happen is it will blow up. Not blow up in an explosion, but it'll get bigger. It'll swell up to a red giant. In fact, our sun will be about 2.5 times bigger than it is today. This is going to happen in about 5 billion years. And once that happens, it swells up. It produces even more energy in its final blow, and then bam, it collapses into itself. It becomes a smaller star, a white dwarf, but eventually over time, the plasma and gas, emits out into space and becomes a planetary nebula. And eventually, once that nebula is gone or the gas dissipates, it will be a white dwarf, just like all the other stars. Now, when it comes to blue supergiant, depending on how big it is, a supergiant, a star that is bigger than ours, will typically also become a red giant, even bigger red giant. Then it will typically collapse again and become a blue giant again, emitting more energy, and then it will become a supernova. And then it becomes a supernova where it explodes, and what happens is the star collapses with so much force. Once it exhausts all of its energy as a blue giant, it exhausts all of its energy, it collapses so quickly with so much energy that it explodes and implodes onto itself, and all of its gas and all of its stuff goes out into space, and with immense force. And this is called a supernova. And then after a while, once that gas is gone, what will remain is a neutron star, a very super dense star that is very small, only maybe a few miles across, but very, very dense neutrons, not even atoms, just neutrons, the remnants of a dead star. Now, even bigger stars is a blue supergiant. They typically become supernovas immediately, and then if you have a big enough star, it'll go supernova, and then it'll collapse on itself into a black hole. The remnants will be a black hole. For example, when a big enough star explodes, it collapses in on itself, right? It collapses into itself and explodes into a supernova, and what's left of it is the black hole, because it collapses with so much force that it becomes a black hole itself. That's how that happened. And then even bigger stars, you have it just collapses right into a black hole immediately, right? Then if you have an even bigger star, you have a gigantic supernova, or typically called a hypernova, where it's just a gigantic burst and blast of energy out into space. And this is typically what makes our star. This is typically what makes stellar nurseries. They have enough mass and energy to make new stars. So that's how it happens. The expansion of the universe is faster than light. Not in all directions, not everywhere. The expansion of space and time varies depending on where you are. But yes, there are pockets of the universe where the universe is expanding faster than light itself. In that case, we'll never be able to see them. We'll never see that section of the universe. The sun has two elements. The sun does not have iron and CO2. Yep, our sun only has hydrogen and helium, mostly. It will have the ability to make some carbon, but that's as far as fusion goes with it. Once it exhausts all of its carbon, it's going to go to become a white dwarf. But many stars, bigger stars that have enough mass, are able to fuse the carbon into even larger elements like nitrogen and sodium and iron, and even heavier elements, depending on how big the star is. Is the Big Bang the ultimate beginning? We don't know if the Big Bang is the ultimate beginning. We don't know. What a beginning means is arbitrary. We don't know what that is. Explain amps and voltage. I believe amps is the amount of current. So the way electricity works is you have ions, right, moving through a coil or a wire. moving through a substance. The faster the more dense ions, the more faster those ions are moving is what current is, right? It's the amount of ions passing through a given area. Voltage, I believe, is the amount of, I don't know. I have to figure that out more. But all I know is that amps is current, which is typically the amount of ions that are passing through a given area in a certain amount of time. Maybe voltage is the same, but just the amount of ions that can. Are superpowers possible? What does that mean? Will everything eventually die? Yeah, everything will die eventually. My sister single. Self-admitted ignorance. Oh yeah. Oh, of course. If I'm ignorant in something, I will admit it. And guess what? I will never say, trust me, bro, I know the answer. I will always say, I don't know, let's find out. In fact, let's do it now. Amps are the amount of electricity used by an item. Volts are the measure of the force of the electric. Oh, so volts is the amount of pressure. A volt is the amount of pressure that a given thing has. A current is the size of the hose. Resistance is if there's any sand in the way. It's all the same. It's different ways of just explain the same thing. Will the universe run out of usable energy? Maybe. Maybe not, though. Maybe when the universe reaches a certain point in entropy, maybe a new phase emerges or a new phase begins where usable energy increases again. You know, maybe the universe stops expanding and collapses. We don't know. These are very big questions. Explain the Northern Lights. Yes, that's a great question. Northern Lights. So, why do we see these different lights, these beautiful auroras, right? These beautiful lights in the northern hemispheres and the southern hemispheres at the poles. Well, the reason why is because of Earth's magnetic field. See, what you're seeing there is cosmic radiation or even solar radiation interacting with Earth's magnetic field. So you can see, here, you have the Earth inside of it is generating a magnetic current because of the convection, the movement of the mantle around the core in the Earth's insides. That produces a magnetic field, electrical currents, and that's what makes the Earth become magnetic in a way. Now, when it comes to the solar radiation hitting the Earth, so you have solar wind, right? Some of it gets caught, some of it gets deflected, but some of it gets caught into the Earth, right? And it gets captured into the Earth's magnetic field where there are susceptible places near the poles, right? Near the poles, that's where the most susceptible areas are of Earth's magnetic field. Hence, you're going to find some of those ions, that solar wind is charged particles, very, very intense ions, high charge energy that hits the Earth's magnetic field, and the Earth's magnetic field is what's, I guess you could say, opposing those ions in the magnetic field, which gives it that light. So that light you're seeing are the ions from the sun that are hitting the Earth's magnetic field, and that's where the edge is. That's where the edge of that interaction is. So you can have some beautiful lights happen in the atmosphere, in the upper atmosphere. Mike, you've taught me more than school. It's almost like it's divine power. Oh, well, these same lights can also give you cancer. So, yeah, maybe it wasn't really divine. Maybe it's an evil power, but yeah. Explain gravity. Um, we don't know what gravity is. All we know is that it seems to be a way of fundamentally so Newton said that gravity is a force. The earth attracts things to its surface. The earth is what's pulling down on the bottle. But now we know that picture is different. That's not quite accurate. The more accurate depiction of gravity is the warpage of space-time. So space and time itself is warping. The earth itself is warping space-time enough to attract this bottle. That's the more accurate depiction of gravity, but we still don't know really what it is. Please become a science teacher. Can you explain the Eve gene? Well, it's not a gene. It's mitochondrial Eve is it's specific parts of our DNA that we share with a given population of people, right? And it's the most recent ancestor that we all living humans today share ancestry with, right? But it's not a specific person, it's a population of people. But again, that changes. Who mitochondrial Eve is always changing, and there's multiple of them. So there is no first. So when you say Eve or Adam, there is no first person. That's not possible. What we mean by it is the population of people that today's population shares ancestry with. And if you go far back enough in time, there's going to be more mitochondrial Eves. If you go further back than that, there will always be a mitochondrial Eve and Adam. In fact, you watching this will eventually be a mitochondrial Adam or Eve. Because eventually, our population is going to have descendants that can be traced back to you. So again, we're all mitochondrial Eves eventually. What was the first movement that began the Big Bang? There was no first movement that made the Big Bang. There was no first movement. That doesn't make sense. In fact, movement in the universe isn't objective. In fact, like I said before, the last live, you can view the universe like a block of cheese. It's just there. And what we designate as space and time, it's just always there. And movement isn't objectively real, it's relatively real. But again, that's just a block model of the universe. That's just one way of viewing it. We don't know if there's a first movement or not. We don't know. All we can know, all we think is the best explanation is that it is all relative. Who made the cheese? If you're going to ask who made the universe, who made God? We can ask that to you. Who made God? How was God there? Like, if you're going to say, oh, we're so complex, therefore a designer, how about God? Isn't God complex? Who made God? If you're going to say nobody made God, God was always there, well, why can't the universe always be there? What's the difference? See, simply saying God did it doesn't answer anything. It doesn't solve anything. You're kicking the can down the road. This is the best live. Thank you. What is dark matter and energy? Sure. Great questions. Dark matter is matter in the universe that we just can't see with light. It doesn't interact with light. But we know it's there because we can gravitationally observe it. We can see how galaxies rotate. Let me see if I can find it. So we know that there's dark matter out in the universe because when we measure galaxies, perfect. Yes, perfect. Okay, so When we look out in the universe at galaxies, what we find is that the typical notion that the stuff in the middle of the galaxy is going to be fast, right? So let's look at this. Do you see how the middle is moving faster than the outer edges? That's not true. That doesn't happen. This is what we would expect if we only knew about the matter we can see with our telescopes. However, when we measure galaxies objectively, we find that they actually move like this, where the inner edges are moving at almost the same rate as the outer edges. That's how galaxies actually rotate, where the outer edges are very similar in rotation to the inner. So we find that unless we input this dark matter, this more gravity into the galaxies, we don't understand them. So dark matter is a necessity that emerges. Dark matter is a necessity that emerges out of the physics. Now, how do we see dark matter? Well, something called gravitational lensing. So when we look out in the universe, when we look at our with telescopes out into the universe, what we find is, okay, let me find a good picture for it. There, perfect. So when we look out in the universe, what we find is a very weird, distorted picture, right, of galaxies. Look at this. Look at these really weird wiggly lines, right? These straight, these weird lines that are distorting, like they look like distorted, right? They look like elongated lines. The reason why is because when the light passes through certain areas of the universe, it passes through black holes, the edges of black holes, or dark matter in galaxies. So we can see the distortion of that light that passes through these really gravitationally influenced regions, and we can see them through our telescopes, and we know that there's something there. There's something there. Because look at that. How do you explain the fact that this happens? Well, it's the gravity that bends the light. Gravity, black holes, bends light. Light bends with space and time, just like everything else. Which is incredible because it helps us understand that there's more out there than we can see with our eyes. There's invisible monsters in the universe that we can literally see indirectly. Black holes, dark matter, these are things that we see with our telescopes indirectly. Why do theists assume the universe requires an anthropomorphic creator? Yeah. Well, the reason why we think there's a creator, people tend to think that way, is because everything in our daily lives, like everything that humans are used to, is created, right? We create food, buildings, tools, cars, right? Habitats, homes, right? We build things all the time. Humans are our own little creators, right? So we tend to personify the universe and say, well, everything else must have a creator. Who put the tree there? Who put the grass there? Who put the sky there? Right? Because we put things somewhere, so there must be somebody above us making the things happen here. But that's not necessarily true. It's a human thing to think about, but it's not necessarily true. And if there is somebody like that, well, who put that person there? Who put that person there that made that person, right? We go on and on forever. You don't need that. Maybe all that's happening in the universe, maybe that's an illusion. Maybe the idea of a creator is an illusion. Maybe nothing's really created. Maybe things just change over time, and we're just part of the change. Hi Lima, how are you? Could you feel pain in the black hole? You wouldn't survive very long. You wouldn't survive very long if you went near a black hole. You would pretty much die instantly. It's not like you go to a black hole, like you jump in, you're like, woohoo, this is fun. No, you're gonna be instantly. There's so much gravity. You don't just jump in the black hole and it's like a roller coaster ride, right? You're not jumping from like the cliff, right? This is a black hole. Like there's so much gravity there that you're gonna smack, like you're gonna become a spaghetti, right? You're gonna become spaghetti. You're not gonna have fun, right? In fact, that actually reminds me of a cool video about the gravity of to visualize gravities. It's difficult to visualize the gravity of a star, but let me put this in perspective for you. Okay, so here is Earth gravity. Right, so here's Earth gravity. Right, a log hits it. That's Earth gravity. Here's Jupiter's gravity. Right, look how fast that was. Jupiter's gravity is super fast. Right, that's how much force is applied on because there's so much mass. There's how much mass is pulling down that log to the car. Right. Now, this is Mars gravity. Look how much less gravity there is, right? That's Mars. That was Mars. Hold on. See, it kind of bounces off, right? This is Uranus gravity. Uranus is about the size of Jupiter, but a little bit smaller. I want to get to moon. All right, here's the moon gravity. Right? Even more bouncing. Even more bouncing. Because there's less gravity pulling in things downwards. Saturn's gravity. Pluto's gravity. It's even less than the moon. Things are really bouncing around. And look, there's almost no damage. There's almost very little damage to the hood. Here's the sun. Guys, get ready. That's the sun's gravity. See how much different it is? Like, it just gets completely demolished. Like, completely like a pancake, right? Like a pancake. So, like, that's just the perspective of how much gravity is in a sun. And remember, black holes are millions of times more powerful than that. Millions, at least. Millions. Okay, so you're not going to go jump into a black hole and be like, woohoo, I'm floating. Yay. You're going to die instantly. Not all stars can become black holes. Yeah. Spaghettification. True. Bro's gonna burn in hell. Why would a loving being burn you? It doesn't seem like a very loving being. Bigly. Do you think we can settle on Mars? Yeah, why not? What makes a black hole? Why they are so strong? Because there's a black hole. Think of a feather, right? Think of a styrofoam, right? You know what a styrofoam is? It's light, right? It's very light. The reason why is because it's not very compacted matter, right? It's basic stuff. Now think of a block of iron. Why is a block of iron, even though it's small, right? It's still heavy, right? It's because it's very densely compacted. Right? The atoms are much more compacted together. It's more dense. That's why iron is way more heavier versus styrofoam, even though they're the same size. Now, when it comes to a black hole is has the mass of a star, but it's the size of a planet. In fact, some black holes are the size of cities. So imagine having all that mass compacted into that small volume, right? Think about how dense that would be. And that's what a black hole is. A black hole is a super small thing, but has a lot of mass. Very dense thing. And it warps space and time so much that even light cannot escape it. If light gets into it, it can't come out, right? That's how powerful. That's how much power they have. Even light itself does not have enough velocity to escape a black hole's gravity. So something really weird happens to black holes. Something that we don't understand. We don't even know what happens inside of a black hole. That's how spooky and mysterious they are. Can there be another universe in the black hole? Maybe. We don't know. Any other questions that you guys wanted me to go through? What drives evolution? Well, essentially chemistry. Chemistry is but natural selection, right? The nature selects who can survive, who will survive. If planet Earth came into existence by chance, why does only one Earth exist in the entire universe? Oh, not at all. Absolutely not. That is absolutely false. There are billions of Earth-like planets in the universe. Well, in our galaxy. In our own galaxy. So exoplanets are... This is an exoplanet. This is a planet that is much like the Earth, but is outside of our solar system. It's called Kepler 1649c. And what we think is that this planet has water on its surface. In fact, it has lots of land and water on its surface, we think, in an atmosphere, just like the Earth. So this is one planet that we think has that. We can measure it has the same amount of mass as us too. It has very similar mass to us. There are many of these kinds of planets. In fact, we have a database of 5,000 that we've seen already. And we barely look for them. So they're ranging in all kinds of sizes, but here's some terrestrial planets. In fact, some planets we found that are smaller than the Earth, like Mars kind of planets. Yeah, but there's a whole list of them, a whole list of planets just like the Earth, in size and perhaps even temperature. Perhaps there's life on these too. And these are planets that are orbiting other stars. There are all kinds of planets out there. In fact, some might be even more suitable for life than the Earth. Maybe the Earth is actually not very good for life. Maybe there's more out there. Most planets we find are big, the size of Jupiter or even bigger. But many of them are like the Earth. Perhaps with life on them too. If a star explodes far away, why does it take so long to reach us? It doesn't reach us. Oh, the light? You mean the light from it? Because space is big, right? The universe is a big place, and light travels in a finite amount of time. See, in our day-to-day lives, when I flick a switch in my room, the light almost immediately comes on, right? We look at the light in a room and it's instantaneous to us. There's no delay, right? But on vast distances, light actually has a delay because light travels at around 600 million miles per hour. 600 million miles per hour. That's 180,000 kilometers per second. Per second. So these are speeds that are so fast that our eyes don't really see them. But because of the vast distances of the universe itself, a star 10 light years away, right, it's going to take light 10 years to reach our eyes. So if a star explodes, that's 10 light years away, it'll take 10 years until we even notice. We won't know until we see the light from it, because it takes time for light to travel to our eyes. Now, when it comes to the sun is about 8 light minutes from us. So if the sun died tomorrow, we wouldn't know for 8 minutes. The sun would be there for 8 minutes. We wouldn't know because it takes 8 minutes for light to get from the sun to our eyes. So actually, I think there's a great video on this. Speed of light. Sun to Earth. I think hopefully I could find it and you guys would be... here it is. This is how fast light is. Look at it. Oh, you can't see. Hold on. Look at it. That's the sun right there. Do you guys see it? That's the sun right there. That's the light from the sun reaching the Earth. The Earth is all the way out here, right? The Earth is all the way out here, right? And that's the sun. That's how slow light is. That's how slow light is. It has to take all that time to reach us. 8 minutes. Because there's 150 million kilometers between us and the sun. Now, let's take a look at... let's speed it up a little bit more. Let's fast forward. Okay. I want to get to the one where it says... Earth to the moon. Yeah, perfect. Here's Earth to the moon. So it takes about 1 second, 1.2 seconds for the light from the Earth to reach the moon. See? It's like ping pong, right? So that's how fast light takes to reach the moon. If I were to shine a light beam at the moon, that's how fast it would take to get there. That's incredible. But again, because there's so much distance. Yeah, the moon is about 250,000 miles away. I think it's like 150, like, I don't know, 300,000 kilometers or something like that. Very far away. And that's why, it takes time to reach our eyes. Somebody asked a question. What do you guys know the question? If the Earth was flat, is the Earth flat? Do it rotate around the sun at 22,000 miles an hour? Yes. The Earth is not flat, but we do rotate around the Earth at, I think it's more than that. I think it's like, how fast do we... 67,000 miles an hour, we're spinning across the solar system around the sun. And the Earth itself is rotating at 1,000 miles an hour, right? Right now, where you're standing, the ground below your feet, relative to the axis of the Earth, is moving at 1,000 miles an hour. The reason why it seems like we're not moving, though, is because motion is relative. This is something profound. Motion is relative. So when I'm on for example, when I'm on a plane moving at 600 miles an hour, why does it feel like I'm not moving? Because everything around me is moving at the same speed, right? If I throw a ball in the plane, that tennis ball is going to still reach my arm. It's not going to fling away 600 miles an hour, right? Because I'm moving at 600 miles an hour in the plane, and so is the ball. It feels like we're not moving at all. The total speed is zero relative to the people in the cabin. The same with the Earth's rotation. Because everything around us is clinging on to the Earth because of gravity, this bottle is moving at 1,000 miles an hour with me. Just as everything else here, moving 1,000 miles an hour, the same speed around the Earth. That's why it feels like we're moving, but we're not. That's why it feels like we're staying still, but we're not. It depends on your latitude. Yeah, of course. Yes, if you want to be technical about it, if you're a physicist, yes, you're correct. That depending on your latitude, at the poles, it's a little bit slower. In other words, when you go northern in latitude, the rotational speed of the Earth on its axis is slower versus somebody on the equator, because the equator, remember, has to travel faster, relatively speaking. But again, this is all details that I don't want to go through, that you can go through, but I'm here to spread the main points. But yes, thank you for that. Why does water move in different directions in north and southern hemisphere? Good question. Currents. It's because of the currents. I believe it's because of the way the gravity works. I'm not too sure. But I believe it's because of the currents, the wind patterns and the currents. That's a good question, though. Very good question. Is the speed of light the fastest in the universe? Well, speed of light is the fastest within space-time. You can't go faster if you're in space and time. But space and time itself doesn't have a limit. Space and time itself can travel faster. This is really weird, right? Really weird. Really weird stuff. Stumped you there. Of course. You think I never get stumped? That's the beauty of the universe. That's what makes science amazing. That I can learn something. That there's something to learn. That's what makes science the best. Because if I'm wrong or I don't know the answer, I get to say I don't know, but I can find out. That's what makes science amazing. I don't sit there and go, God, the Bible did it. God did it. I don't do that. I say, I don't know. I'm honest. I don't know. Let's find out. That's the beauty of reality, that we don't know everything. That's the beauty of it all. The minute you say God did it is the minute you stop thinking. You stop wondering. You stop being curious. You stop being inquisitive. You stop appreciating the universe. What is the universe expanding into? Itself. The universe isn't necessarily expanding into something. Space and time itself is expanding, but the common idea is you want to put a boundary on the universe, right? When we imagine the universe in our heads, we imagine the Earth, right? Like a bubble where there's something blackness around that. But that's not how the universe works. The universe is everything. There's no perhaps it's everything there is. Perhaps there's nothing beyond the universe. And in that case, the universe expands into itself. If it expands into something more, it's expanding into more universe. But it's also possible that there is something beyond our bubble. But again, if there is, it's just more space and time. So, most likely, we don't know. But we don't know the exact answer. These are great questions that we don't have the best answers to. I don't know, but let's find out. How far can you zoom in past an atom? Is it that empty? How far can you zoom in past an atom or and atom? We don't. Another great question. If you go in, so inside an atom we find protons, electrons, and neutrons. Right? We find nucleus. We find things orbiting around it. Well, they don't really orbit. They spin around it. We don't really know the exact location of an electron. Think of it more like a cloud, right? An atom's like a cloud of energy. But if you go deeper than that, you can find quarks and gluons, even smaller particles in these protons and neutrons. But beyond that, we don't really know. We don't really know. String theory attempts to figure it out by saying, well, there are fundamental one-dimensional strings that vibrate and give rise to the particles. That's string theory. That's what attempts to try to figure that out. But again, great question. We don't know. Maybe that's all there is. Maybe there is something more fundamental. We don't know. But let's find out. Pixels. You guys love to mention the simulation, but who's simulating the simulator? You can have an infinite. It seems to me that everywhere you go, every answer you have as people with a finite brain, it's always going to lead to an infinite regression, right? These are profound questions that we don't have the answers to. Who made that? Who made that? Who made that? It can go on forever. But let's just admit that we don't have the answer and wipe our hands and say, I don't know. It's mysterious. Why must we instill things? Why must we fill the gaps in with magic or simulation or God? Why not say, we don't know? Let's continue to find out. If the universe is expanding, didn't it start from a point of singularity? That was the idea for many years, yes, that there was a singularity. But again, another point where we don't understand. You guys are asking these very deep questions that nobody understands. Relativity cannot explain why or what the Big Bang is. We cannot explain the Big Bang with relativity, with Einstein's equations. Even Einstein, the genius he was, could not figure out what the Big Bang was. That's why since Einstein died, we've been trying to figure out the answer. The best option we have, the best available answer we have, is in quantum mechanics, called inflationary cosmology. And what that says is there was a quantum field that permeate all of space and time. They're eternal, they exist forever, but they fluctuate, and randomly they yield inflationary universes. They can fluctuate in ways that yield energy, and this makes universes emerge from prior energy. The point is that there is a fundamental layer of reality that's allowing this energy to go from potential to kinetic. And it could be random, it could be quantum mechanical. You don't need God for it, though. But again, these are just the best ideas we have. We don't know the answer. We don't know the answer, but they're good questions. As far as we know, if you trace back the universe's expansion, it leads to a smaller universe. That's all we know. We live in a very big universe, comparatively speaking, to the universe 13 billion years ago. Everything was much more closely compacted. Now we live in a bigger universe. This is amazing to understand. This is amazing. For the first time in human history, we have some answers, some real answers. We don't know, though. But the beautiful part about that is we don't know everything. It's bittersweet. It's bittersweet. it's nice knowing that we have some answers, but it's also scary knowing that we don't have all the answers. So it's a bittersweet existence we live. It's a bittersweet pocket that we live in. We have answers to why we didn't come from monkeys. Nobody said we come from monkeys. We share common ancestry. And I explained that in the beginning of my lecture. But you didn't listen. You weren't here probably. Do you think we're alone in the universe? I made a video about that on my YouTube. And if you're here, please subscribe to my YouTube if you're here. I have a great video about that where I made it just a couple weeks ago. You should watch it if you like alien stuff. Can atoms exist in multiple places at the same time? Yeah. Possibly. So quantum theory says that on the quantum level, we cannot know with certainty the state of any particle. We don't know the state of any particle. We do not know the exact state of a particle. All we can do is predict with some probability that we'll find it here or there. Or it'll be in this state or this state. So again, we don't know the exact state of any particle. And what that means is something called a superposition. And what this means is particles exist in multiple states at one time. They exist in multiple ways at once in this cloud of probability. When you think of a particle, think of a cloud of probability. That's all we know. Our brains may never be able to understand quantum mechanics. But all we know is that things happen really weird on the smaller levels. Really weird stuff. Really weird stuff. Where did snakes originate from? Amphibians. All reptiles emerged from the amphibians. What do you think of the one electron universe? Yeah, very interesting idea. Because we know that when we look at the CMB radiation, and this is radiation from the Big Bang itself. When we look at the CMB radiation, this is radiation from the Big Bang. And all we know is that what we notice from this radiation, this is microwave radiation that permeates all the universe. It's not really a circle, right? This is just a two-dimensional depiction of all we observe in the universe. This is everything we observe. And what we observe is a very uniform pattern of energy, right? Perturbations of energy that seem to be very uniform on a global scale, universal scale. So if you zoom in on this, if you make this smaller, right, what you'll notice is that the universe could have magnified, right? The expansion, the inflation of the universe is happening in all directions, which means that you can imagine the universe being a particle, but then magnifying. And this is what This is what happens, right? This is a particle this could be a particle that has been magnified. Again, this is a very. It doesn't change anything about anything, but the point is that, yes, the universe could have been a particle in the beginning, that it magnified into this big universe, like a balloon, exactly, like a balloon. But again, we don't know the shape or the size of the universe. We don't know enough to make accurate statements about this. This is amazing. Anyone who thinks otherwise is... That's why I do this. The reason why I'm doing this is because it is amazing. Learning is amazing. That's what I'm trying to show you guys, that learning is amazing. And I'm not saying there is no God. I'm not here to say there is no God. I'm here to say that maybe there's more than God out there. Maybe there's more to the universe than just a guy from your book of magic. That's all. There's a lot of benefits of detaching from religion. A lot of benefits that people that are religious don't see. And the universe is amazing. And the more you learn, the more you appreciate it. The more I learn about the universe, the more I learn about people, the more I learn about biology, the more I learn about space, the more I appreciate it. The more you just love life. And it's beyond anything anybody can tell you in religion. It's the feeling you get from reality is understanding reality is more transcends any kind of religious or spiritual notion to me, because it's real. It's real. This stuff is real. This really exists. And you can't get that from religion. You just can't. You just can't. If you were chill this time, I would watch. Well, I wish I could do these lives every day, but unfortunately, people need to we need to debate things like God. I think these are worthy of debate. I think debating engages people. You have no time. Me? He's explaining better than university professors. I don't know about that. I'm not a teacher. I don't teach. All I do is try to explain things in the way I can. That is simple, right? Because I'm not very smart, but my skill is that I can make complex things more simpler for people to understand. That's all I try to do. How were the first two people made? I explained this before. There were no first two people. There was no first person, because every generation before that person is going to be still a person. There was no moment where we just began to exist. Who was your favorite scientist, or the one you learned the most from? I don't know if I have a favorite scientist, but the one who influenced me the most was Carl Sagan by far. Carl Sagan. What Sagan did better than anybody else is he wanted to teach science in a way that made people fascinated and feel something from that, right? Sagan wanted people to feel magic, the sense of magic when they learned science, and that's what he did. That's what he accomplished. He brought science to people he brought a new aspect to science. I'm not a monkey. Can energy create matter? Energy is a property of matter. There is this correlation between the two. There's a direct correlation between the two. But yes, matter can precipitate from energy. Matter can precipitate from prior pure energy. Nothing's created. You can't create energy, right? Energy simply changes states. Is it possible for humans to travel to the other solar systems efficiently? So no. At the current moment, no. Our best rocket ships would take 75,000 years to reach the next star system, and that's only 4 light years away. So our best, fastest rocket ships would take 75,000 years to reach the next star. However, there are a few solutions. There are a few ideas as to how to get there faster. Um, Warp drives, they can bend space. Fusion rockets, you have antimatter rockets, fusion rockets that can travel perhaps 10 to 20% the speed of light. Imagine that. Imagine having a rocket that is traveling 60 million miles an hour. It's possible with fusion. That would allow us to get there in 40 years. That would allow us to get to the next star in 40 years. That's not too bad. Not too bad. But I don't think that we are going to go to other star systems. I think that that's going to be for our future species, our future descendants, not for us. I think we're too dumb to do it, or I think we're too primitive to do it. Explain our evolution before the homogeneous. Yeah, so this is, I love this picture. This is one of my favorite pictures. Again, this is not, we don't morph into animals, right? We don't morph from a monkey to an ape or monkey to a human. But the idea is, over many generations, our lineage can change, right? Our DNA can change, hence our species can change. But these are humans, and further back you can see this is the first homogeneous, the first members of the homogeneous. This is Australopithecus afarensis. This is one of the ancestors we share with chimpanzees. Some of the first ones that split from the chimpanzees. And then if you go further back than that, you see that we resemble more primitive apes that walk on all fours, right? And then here's Proconsul, one of the first apes that lost its tail, right? Because they walked more on land. They walked more, instead of swimming from tree to tree, they lived more on the land, on the grass, in grasses. And then monkeys here, you can see about 50 million years ago, the ancestors were the ancestors of all the monkeys that live today. Still have their tails. And before that, you have more mammals, marsupial type of animals, longer tails, on all fours. They live near trees, underground. And then before that, reptiles. Before that, amphibians. Before that, fish. Not insects, but vertebrate, worm-like invertebrates, and then bacteria, and then RNA. So you can see this is 4 billion years of natural selection taking place in front of you on one picture. This is amazing. This is amazing stuff. Yeah, people don't realize how much time that is. This isn't Pokemon, right? Where you go, all right, they're going to turn into a Charmander. What's this? He's evolving. Like, that's not how it works, right? This is billions. This is a long time, okay? Billions of years, a long time of small changes that happen over time. Right? That's profound. That we know this. How is it dumb to think we come from monkeys? We have tailbones. How do you explain the fact that we have tailbones? Why is it that we have fur all around our bodies? We have fur, right? Why is it that we have very similar structure, fossil structure, or skeleton structure to the monkeys? Why do we have fingers like the monkeys? Why do we have toes like the monkeys, and feet, and two arms? And why? It's because we share common ancestry, common descent. We also can see this in our DNA. But people think that humans are the end of evolution, but that's not true. We are just one branch in the tree of evolution, like I was talking about earlier, right? This is This is really what evolution looks like. This is really what it looks like. Look at this tree of life. Right? Look at how many different pathways life went. Look at all these thousands of pathways. And this is just the main ones, right? There's all kinds of more pathways in between, but the point is, look at how many branches there are to the tree of life. There's millions of branches. And a long time. It didn't happen one day or 6 days. Yeah, we're still evolving. We're always evolving because your DNA mutates. Every time your cells replicate, your chromosomes are changing. Well, not every single time, but sometimes. Every time your cells duplicate, there are changes, either good, bad. They can help you survive. They cannot help you survive. They can give you cancer. They can do all kinds of things. But the point is that evolution is a chemical process. It's always happening. It's just slow. You just don't see it on a day-to-day basis. It's not like Pokemon. So, be that as factual than the Adam and Eve stories of myth. Yeah. Unfortunately, the Bible is mythology. It's not real. So our DNA is programmed to change. Here, let me explain how. Okay, so essentially, your cell, you have a mother cell here. And what happens is DNA inside winds together, right? The DNA cell, the chromosomes inside are replicating molecules. The DNA molecules are replicating, right? And they form chromosomes inside. And when they produce chromosomes, the chromosomes actually begin to split, divide. And it drives mitosis. It drives the cells to divide. Right? So that one parent cell became two daughter cells, and something called cell division. And then those chromosomes then split off together, and they become a pair again. That's the basics of it. So DNA is what drives evolution, right? This process of this chemical process is what drives evolution. And your DNA is this long strand, right? DNA is a very long strand of molecules. Millions of molecules, billions of molecules in one strand of DNA, right? Each structure is built upon amino acids and sugars, right? And that's what your DNA is. And each one of these structures tells your cells how to duplicate, how to divide, how to replicate. Depending on the structure of your DNA, it tells you what cells are going to be made, right? That's how it happens. So when we say your DNA is the code, that's what we mean. When we say DNA is the code of your life, what we mean is the molecules that make up your DNA are influencing other molecules to change, or the catalyst for change. And these are your base pairs. These are your chromosomes. And we know that they contain the DNA that makes up who you are. Every one of your cells is a little miniature you. And your body is made of trillions of cells, constantly changing, constantly dying, replicating. And that's who we are. And again, DNA is just a molecule. It's just a molecule. Here's an image of DNA, what it really looks like. This is just a structure, right? But if you take a electron microscope, you'll find that DNA is actually that. That's all it is. Just a strand. It's just it's just a squiggly strand. That's it. That's DNA. It's unwinding right now, so DNA is unwinding in this process. But the point is that it's this very squiggly line. That's it. That's all it is. And it's a long chain of sugars, a long chain of amino acids and molecules, organic molecules. These are electron microscope images of pollen. This is a real image of electron microscope of pollen. These are little pollen particles. Electron microscopes are amazing. Here's a fly. These are real images of flies and animals and insects. Here's blood cells. These are blood cells right here. That's what your blood is made of. Guess what this is? Anybody know what this is? These are real images. Yeah, that's salt. These are salt crystals. Anything else here? Oh yeah, so... Oh, here's a snowflake. Wow. That's incredible. Ants are creepy. It's a whole little universe on the micro level. A whole little universe. I think this is wood, or I think this is bone, actually. Your bone is very porous. It's not as solid as you think it is. It's actually full of lots of air. But, oh yeah, here's skin. Here's your skin. Really, really weird stuff. Really interesting stuff. So we have the macro world, the big world of the universe, then we have the small world, right? Look how amazing that is. We have the ability now to understand the big universe and the small universe. The microverse and macroverse, yeah. I don't believe in macro, but I believe in microverses. Explain the Big Bang Theory. The Big Bang is the expansion of space and time. That's simple. It's that simple. Here's a great, I showed this yesterday. Here's a fantastic image of what it means for the universe to expand. So imagine this is the universe. You can see that all points of it are expanding, stretching apart. Right? All points of the universe are stretching away from another. The space in between the galaxies are stretching. You can see the further away it is, the more faster the universe is expanding away from things. It's like stretching a rubber band, right? Space and time itself is stretching. space itself is stretching apart. This is fascinating to understand. There's something pushing and pulling, ripping apart the universe. In fact, we now know that the universe is not only expanding, but the expansion's accelerating. It's getting faster and faster. The stretching is becoming faster and faster. Time isn't stretching. It is. Space, time are the same things. Space and time are the same things. They are the same things. And time is just one aspect of the universe, just like space is. There's a dimension. There's 4 dimensions. There's three is space and 1 is time. Time is 1 dimension. Wasn't the universe once known as static? What caused it to not be static? Yeah, so the evidence for the Big Bang is something called redshifting. So what happened was, when we looked out in the universe with telescopes, what we see is all the galaxies are, the light from the galaxies are becoming redder. So when we look out in the universe, all the galaxies we see are becoming redder. What that means is the light is shifting longer, right? Because longer light in the visible spectrum is redder. So what that means is the elongation of light means that it's moving away from us, that the space is stretching between us, causing the light from them to become redder. Because light that travels from these galaxies is also stretching as space and time stretches. So when we look out in the universe, we see all galaxies, well, most galaxies, except for ones that are closer to us, that are moving towards us because of gravity. But for the vast majority of galaxies, they are becoming redder. And what that means is they're all moving away from us, just as that image I just showed you explained. Okay, so this is a direct proof of the Big Bang expansion. We also know that the CMB radiation, this is radiation from the Big Bang itself. At the Big Bang, there was an unleashing of energy, light, in the form of most likely gamma rays. But what happened was, over time, that light, as space and time between stretched, so did the light. It became microwave. Microwave is one of the longest wavelengths we know of. The point is, what explains the fact that we see this all around the universe. We see this light all around the universe. And this tells us that something weird happened 13 billion years ago that affected the entire universe. And that's the Big Bang. Okay? And the other big piece of evidence is the abundance of elements in the universe. So at the Big Bang, you would expect certain elements, like, for example, helium and lithium and deuterium, to be produced in certain ways, certain numbers. And when we look out in the universe and observe the different elements, that's exactly what we see. We see an abundance of elements as hydrogen and helium, and the same isotopes that we would expect them to be produced at the Big Bang. Because at the Big Bang, there was so much energy. At the Big Bang, there was so much energy that something called Big Bang nucleosynthesis took place, where amounts of those isotopes, those atoms, were produced. Just as atoms fused together in stars, the Big Bang was so hot and intense and dense that even in the space and time that we inhabit, things and elements and isotopes were able to be produced in these ratios. And that's exactly what we see in the universe. This is direct evidence of evolution. No, these are not just opinions. This is direct evidence that we can observe with telescopes. We can see the galaxies shifting away from us. We can see the ratios of elements. We can see the CME radiation. This is stuff we can see with telescopes. This is not just my opinion. How does so much life appear on the planet when others seem devoid of any species at all? That would be a good argument if we actually observed other planets for life, but we haven't. We don't know if there's life out there. We barely looked. We've barely looked for life. Even Mars could have life. We don't know. We don't even have the technology to know if life is on Mars. We don't know if life could exist on Enceladus or Titan or Europa. These are all possibilities. We still don't know that. So we don't know how much life there could be out there. Maybe the universe is teeming with life. Maybe there's so much life out there. Maybe life is very easy to be made. We don't know. We have barely looked for it. What about the UFOs in the news? Yeah, I'm skeptical about it. To think that there's an alien that's going to come across from the galaxy and land on the Earth and crash doesn't seem like a smart alien. Even if it was a real alien, I wouldn't want to talk to it. It's dumb. I think that if we had evidence for aliens, we would actually have it. We wouldn't be told that there's aliens. We'd actually have the evidence. To me, the people who talked about the aliens in the UFO hearings, I think they were insane. I think they were psychologically insane. I think that they had no evidence. They possessed no evidence at all. All they did was state stuff. Oh, yeah, trust me, I saw an alien. Like, I'm skeptical about that. But I'll be the first person to admit there's aliens. I'd love to see the evidence for it. I'd love to, but I just don't see it. What happened to Pluto? Nothing. Pluto's still here. It's just that we realized that. So what happened after Hubble? Around the early 2000s, late 90s, we discovered way more planets that were beyond Neptune. We discovered way more planets that were larger than Pluto. Ceres, all kinds of dwarf planets, right? So we realized that Pluto is not really a major planet, it's actually a minor planet, just like the ones around it. And we now classify it as something smaller, as a dwarf planet. That's all. We just classify it differently, which is correct. That's the more technical way of doing it. Pluto's not a major planet, it's a smaller planet. What causes Earth plates to shift? Earthquakes? Yeah, so the way plate tectonics works is there's a lot of pressure right underneath the Earth's surface is liquid molten. And what that means is what you have, see, they have the mantle here, right? You have liquid molten. This is like heated iron and nickel, things like that are very pressurized because of the amount of pressure. And what they do is they push upwards. They push upwards and they can move the crust, right? They put pressure, they apply pressure on the crust and they move it. The crust can move above it. And what happens is volcanoes is where places where the mantle reaches the hot lava reaches the surface, right? It reaches within cracks. It finds cracks in the crust, and it reaches upwards and it bulges outwards. That's a volcano. Now, when it comes to earthquakes, what you have is the plates themselves, right? The crust themselves. Sometimes they can collide with each other. They can collide. They can slide across each other, right? They can sink, right? They can do this, sink into each other, and that's what this is. That's an earthquake. An earthquake happens when some of that plate collapses, and the crust around it starts to shift and wobble, right? Because there's a lot of energy there in that collapse. Mountains form this way. Mountains form when you have two plates do this, right? They collide and they form mountains. Like that. Yeah, but these convergent plates is when earthquakes happen when you have two plates do this. One sinks below and collapses. And that material collapses and forms that shaking. Please explain better. Go learn it. I'm not a perfect teacher here. And tsunamis, yes, tsunamis happen that way too. If you notice, there's a lot of tsunamis near the Eastern Asia and Western America. The reason why is because there's a plate there, right? There's a big plate, and there's boundaries to the plate, and that boundary is where those plates collide and interact with each other. That's why there's a lot of mountains around these regions, and a lot of volcanoes, and a lot of earthquakes. Can you explain consciousness? Well, I'll do it as best as I can, but we still don't know much about it. But to me, the best way to explain consciousness is through bioelectricity. Your body is a vast collection of nerves. Your body contains thousands of nerves. And what these nerves do is they can tell your cells, they can get information from your cells. Your cells they're called pain receptors, right? What they do is they act on stimuli. So if for example on your arm, if I slap my arm, why does it hurt? Because that pain, what that pain is those cells in my skin sending signals through my nerves, right? They get stimulated by that movement. They produce signals. They go through my nerve endings, through my body, into my brain. And they tell my brain, pain, there's pain, right? So that's a feeling. When I smack my arm, it takes time for that energy to reach my brain and tell me that there's pain. And the same applies to everything around you. Your whole body works this way. Your eyesight, your eyes filter in energy from the world, light from the world, and that gets sent to your brain. It stimulates your eyes. It tells your cells that, hey, there's light there, and it gets sent to your brain. And your brain is what produces this colors and this map around you, the shapes you see around you. Same with your hearing. When you hear sound, right? Those sound waves are traveling to your eardrums, your ears, your neurons in your ears. They produce signals that are affected by the sounds, and they get sent to your brain. Same with your smell. When you smell something, those molecules of, poop. Let's say there's poop nearby. Poop molecules go into your nose. They affect your neurons by your nose. You have thousands of neurons in your nose. And they get sent to your brain, making you smell. Taste. When you taste something, those molecules infected in your tongue go to your brain, and they tell your brain, hey, it tastes like this. So if you imagine senses that way, what you realize is that your body works through electricity. Bioelectricity, right? Because it's really biology. It's really these organic molecules exchanging electrochemistry, energy in that way. So consciousness to me is the sum total of all those interactions that your brain is processing. And from those interactions allows you to generate this map of what you see around you, what you feel around you, what you experience around you. So to me, consciousness is how you electrically experience the universe. But again, that's just me. I could be wrong, but that's my opinion on consciousness. And it seems to be the case when we take a look at how the body works. But if it's true that we are just molecules in motion, look at what we can do as these molecules in motion. That's profound. Who we are, what we can do. Yeah, there's a lot of mystery in the world around us, right? But the fact that we are a part of it, regardless of what we are, regardless of where we came from, the fact that we're here, understanding things, makes me appreciate it. It's profound. We're here by chance? Well, maybe. If we're here by chance, then it doesn't change anything. It's actually more amazing to understand that we're here by chance. The fact that we are here by chance makes things more incredible. Just experiencing things, that's in itself amazing. How is the earth made? Rocks, just little rocks. I talked about that before. I'll record the live and send to my YouTube, so you guys can watch it again on YouTube. But yeah, that's all. I think I'm done. I'm tired. Spent 2.5 hours explaining this to you guys. Hopefully you learned something today. Thank you. Best Live on TikTok. Thank you. I think that learning is important, right? We should all be learning something every day. You're like the Carl Sagan. Thank you. Thank you. Why do we have different fingerprints? Genetics, development. When you're an embryo, your skin develops differently. Everybody develops differently, just in a tiny way, and that makes you have different fingerprints. But yeah, subscribe, follow, go to my YouTube, follow my YouTube. W Mike, W Science, W Veganism, W Take. I don't like that WL stuff. It's very annoying to me. But yeah, thank you. Well, we had less trolls today, less hating today, less Christian nonsense today. That was good to see. It was in the comments, I didn't see it. 8 billion fingerprints that are unique. What a coincidence. Well, so do other chimpanzees and other apes have the same fingerprints as we do. Like they also have fingerprints that are unique. We're not special. There's nothing unique about us as humans. We're like all the other apes. We're just like all the other apes. Just a little bit smarter. That's all. And that's debatable too. Mm. 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 I'm tired, guys. That was a long. You guys, I did a lot of lecturing today. This is like a college lecture. This is like a college lecture to me. What are topics you guys want to know about for next time? Nothing you said made sense. Get used to it. The universe isn't here to make sense to you. The human body? Okay. Look at the trees. What's your favorite random science fact? There is no one fact that makes me that is a favorite. But Einstein did say something about the universe that I like. He said the greatest, the most interesting thing about the universe is that it's comprehensible. And to me, that's the most amazing thing about the universe, that we can comprehend it in the first place. That's the most amazing fact. Do video games make you smarter? Yeah, Call of Duty makes you smarter. Why does dense water float on less dense water? Ice on water. Yeah, so typically when you have a very when you have a liquid, a solid typically is more denser, right? Because the atoms are compact when it comes to solids versus a liquid. But in the case of water, it's different. Water is a specific molecule that when it solidifies, it crystallizes. And the specific structure of those crystals of water, those H2O molecules, that specific structure tends to be structured in a way that allows for more space in between those atoms. And in that case, it's going to be less dense than liquid water. That's why ice floats, because of the way it crystallizes as it freezes. Hopefully that answered your question. That's all. I hope you have a good day. Keep learning, guys. Science is great. Science is king. What age did I discover you were awesome? I don't know. I was always the weird kid that would always... Not the weird kid, but I was always the one that nobody understood. The one that... when I was a kid, I felt pretty isolated in my curiosity for science. Nobody around me cared as much as I did. And still the same thing happens. Still today. There's almost nobody I know that is as curious as me until I saw Carl Sagan on Cosmos. That's who inspired me to continue. Carl Sagan changed everything for me. He really did. Because for the first time in my life, I realized that there is somebody out there who is as curious as me. So, all right, guys. Double slit. Well, we'll talk about that next time. I'm too tired. But yeah, have a good day.